Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Test Chatbots Better, Use AI to Test AI, sponsored by Qyrus and featuring Amit Deshpande and Ravi Sundaram. Before our presentation begins, let me quickly explain the console. The panel on the right has a feature to chat, ask questions, answer some poll questions, and download the session slide deck. If you happen to minimize this panel, just click on the chat button to reopen it. Should you experience any technical issues, please feel free to send me, Sarah Crocker, a private chat, and I'll be happy to help you. There will be a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to enter your questions at any time throughout the presentation. To optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience, please close any other applications you may have running in the background. This session is being recorded and will be made available to watch on demand. Once the recording is ready, you'll get an email with instructions to access the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our speakers.
Sarah, thank you. That was a very kind introduction and a lot of wonderful details as well. We appreciate that. I think given the audience today, it's safe or relatively safe to say that just about everybody attending this webinar has heard about or tried ChatGPT. And many of you are likely familiar with other large language models as well. I mean, the point is that ChatGPT has been making the news of late. And also, ever since OpenAI kind of launched, the competition between Google and Microsoft and Meta has become much more acute and certainly much more visible. So although the promise of AI is, I'd say, long overdue, the present rush to market is already filled with some well-known errors. So if you think about Google and sort of the mistake that Google Bard made, it was unfortunately well advertised and also quite expensive. Along similar lines, Microsoft has had its own challenges, although they made some wonderful news about their investment in this ChatGPT area and things of that sort. Microsoft is currently dealing with bias problems, and they're making news for, I'd say, unexpected or unfortunate reasons. In fact, a recent Microsoft announcement or spokesperson recently said that it's almost impossible to test everything in a lab. A lot has to be tested in the public domain. And they have to do this, especially given the scale of what they're trying to accomplish with AI. And finally, I don't think anybody on this webinar will be surprised to know that Wall Street has also imposed a ban. This ban, perhaps temporary, is nonetheless an important indicator of what we're dealing with. But to be clear, all this negative stuff aside, to be clear, ChatGPT and its variants, language models, they will bring world-changing capabilities and will make a massive and positive impact on the world. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. However, they might create some chaos along the way. So the key takeaways for us, as we look at this space and as we react to this space are the following. One, AI algorithms and technology, despite the many winters, they might finally be ready, at least in some shape or form. The audience and customers are definitely ready. We all want to adopt, and so the groundwork for adoption is certainly in place. The deeper question is whether the data matches the intent. The deeper question is, how do we address errors? How do we address bias? And how do we address things like fake information? So against this backdrop, which is the big, broad industry trend today, which all of us are very familiar with. So against that backdrop, our focus today is narrower and very, very important. We want to discuss corporate chatbots. I mean, this technology has been around for a while. Clearly they're very, very helpful. They've saved corporations a lot of money. They've increased efficiency. And especially when there's a labor shortage, I mean, I can't imagine interacting with banks and other entities without the assistance of a chatbot. However, given the explosion of ChatGPT, the expectations for corporate bots are now significantly higher. Where in the past we might have accepted some mistakes, we will not accept mistakes today. So if chatbots are implemented poorly, they can be frustrating and can have definitely can have undesired outcomes and provide undesired user experiences. So often this leads to user abandonment. So the defection behavior is not unlike what we've seen in mobile apps, where 45% of people typically abandon a mobile app if their first interaction with that mobile app is not good. So they just delete the app. So ChatGPT's, corporate bots rather are going through a similar process right now. They're going through a similar challenge right now, where because of the expectations set in the market, because of this proliferation of ChatGPT type technology, there's just a different expectation. So over the next 30 minutes, we will discuss chatbot testing and we will discuss how to get it right. I mean, that's our primary focus. We will briefly discuss the elements of typical bots. What's an utterance, what's an intent, what are entities, how do they all come together, why are they important? We will talk about how do you test a bot and what are the challenges. And we will also talk to you and show you a solution that we have called Sage, which is essentially our AI testing solution for AI, our chatbot tester. So, our aim, our goal is to help chatbots fulfill their potential. We want them to be able to deliver your corporate goals, and most of all, give your clients the experience that they deserve, right? Especially given today's expectations. So with that, I'm going to hand this conversation over to Amit, who leads our Qyrus engineering team, and he'll walk you through some of the things that I quickly summarized, essentially how do we test and how do we test specifically with Sage. Amit, may I hand this to you?
Yes, thanks, Ravi. So before we get to testing of bots, just a quick look at what we're going to discuss, and that's Ravi and that's me. We have introduced ourselves already. So what we're essentially going to discuss are the following. One is some basics about AI-based bots, and then get to the testing. And through this course, we'll also understand what are the typical challenges. And rather than describing them in a lot of words, our intent is to make sure that you understand it when we go through some of these examples, when we set the context as part of understanding the elements of chatbot, and then sort of dive and try and see what is the life cycle of bot testing typically looks like, and then briefly discuss about what other things that we're adding at the end of this discussion. Right. So let's begin by sort of understanding. So now it's important to understand these terms because it'll help us all understand how we actually test this. And before we get there, so one of the things that I would like to highlight is the key difference between rule-based bots and AI-based bots, right? So and the difference is that AI-based bots have ability to understand free-flowing input, right? So where the users need not follow a specific grammar or structure to his or her requests, right? So in AI world, we call these as utterances, right? So what are utterances is what did the user say, right? And a bot's primary job is to understand what this utterance actually means, right? And in essentially what it means is what is the user trying to say, or what is the intent, as we call it, that the user is trying to express, and that needs to be extracted from the utterance. And from these utterances, the bot must also understand the specifics of the requests. And these specific attributes are what we call as entities, right? So just to recap, so utterance is what the user says, and intent is what the bot understands and extracts. And then from that intent, we extract the specifics or the entities, as we call them. So utterance, intent, and entities are three key things that we need to keep in mind, because this is what our discussion today will be around, right? And you would have understood by now that a bot's quality, right? So when I say for the rest of this discussion, so whenever I say a bot, I'm only referring to AI-based bots and not rule-based bots. So essentially what it means is a bot's quality is a function of how well intents and entities are extracted or detected, to be specific. So in this webinar, we will cover how do we test intents and entity detection of your bot, right? So and again, before we get into the details, now let's understand sort of our setup, right? So one of the things is bot building today has been easier than ever, right? So there are many platforms which will help you build bots which are extremely easy in an extremely easy manner, I would say. And from that perspective, so when you look at it, there are three main platforms, right? Which is Dialogflow, Vid.ai, Amazon Lex, and we are specifically calling this out as some of the key players in this space, right? But again, before we dive into the details, another aspect that I would like to sort of call out is that in an ideal world where we are doing comprehensive testing or sort of end-to-end testing of a bot, so it involves many other things like the flow control, what we call as fallback intents. If the bot doesn't understand what to say or what to respond, it falls back onto something. So there are aspect of fulfillment, which is essentially the API call, and we'll sort of briefly understand how that works and all those things, right? But we will be primarily be focusing on intent and entity detection because these are the first two things that should happen correctly. Everything else follows after that. So if I don't know what the user is talking about, no matter I have all the APIs which are working excellently well, they'll not be able to respond back correctly. So the key thing is that the first two aspects should work really, really well, right? So with that aside, so we spoke about and Ravi set the context by saying this: we are primarily focusing on enterprise/corporate bots as part of this. Now, we have seen many enterprises and businesses building bots using Dialogflow by Google, as you know, and Bit.ai, which is by Meta, and Amazon Lex, which is from AWS/Amazon, right? And there are many other platforms out there, including now people building custom bots as well. Not necessarily they have to be on this, but these are some of the easy ways to do this. So as part of this webinar, we'll be using Dialogflow. And then please note that we will not be going deep into the bot building process itself, but instead we'll be focusing on the testing process, right? So that's the key. So if because there's a lot of documentation available on how you can build bots and all, but we will only be focusing on the areas that are important to us, which sort of aid the testing process itself. So we'll be using Dialogflow as an example. So now quickly moving to the next one. So let's understand some of the internals, right? So, and again, continuing with our example that we opened this discussion with, the example utterance, where a user is trying to apply for a $20,000 car loan, right? And as you can see, the utterance is sent to the banking bot, right? And there are two extractors here at work, right? So one is what we call as an intent extractor, and the other one is entity extractor. And you can see that the intent is extracted as loan application, and entities are amount, right, for which the loan is getting applied, and the type of the loan, which is the car loan, right? And please note a key thing here is that these entities are defined by the bot developer, right? So what it means is, as part of the bot building process, you can have multiple intents and multiple entities, but they have to be defined by the bot developer, because every business has to decide what functionality are they exposing through these bots. Now, once these entities and intents are detected correctly, as you can see, they are sent to a fulfillment hook, which basically is an API call based on which is think of it as like a client which calls the corresponding APIs whose requests, right? So the API request is formed by these entities and intents. And another interesting thing is you can also see that the bot stores the context, right? So there's something called as context store. So, and right now it is empty. It stores the context, and context basically saves the preceding utterances and responses from the user and the bot respectively. So what it means is basically to understand what was asked before. So now if you move to the next example, so and you can see as part of the next example here, the question that is asked is it's a new utterance now. So it says, what is the status of my car loan application? So assuming that this utterance came right after the user applied for the loan, the bot now extracts the entities from the context store as well, right? So because it knows that there was an application before, right? And from the context store, and you can see here that the context store now has the value from the previous exchange. For example, you can see that there is an application ID which was stored as part of the context store previously, and it is retrieved, and then the next request is made. So basically, it's important to extract intents correctly. It's important to extract entities correctly, and then if it's a longer conversation, you have to know what was asked before. And that is what forms as part of the context store. Now, when you put all these things together, so now by now, sort of you would have imagined, since AI-based bots are free-flowing conversation agents, there can be multiple ways of asking for a thing, right? So you can frame that sentence or utterance in any way. So it's important for us to test the intent detection, so that when this same question is asked, which points to this points to intent that you have defined. So the bot should be in a position to detect intent no matter how that question is formed, right? And also the specifics of the question need to be extracted correctly. So another example, if I can take off, and let's say you're building a weather bot. Now, if you want to ask what is the weather in NYC, right? So the bot should be able to detect that the entity is weather for the city called NYC, which can be also said as New York, which can also be said as New York City, which is NYC. So the bot should be able to detect that as a city and not anything else, right? So because it is said in NYC. So hence the need is for us to generate thousands of these utterances, and these utterances, should encompass all, idiosyncrasies of human communication, especially in the written form, right? And then we'll sort of touch upon what those idiosyncrasies are, and generate. We should also be able to generate a lot of synonymous entities like NYC and New York, and that's exactly where Sage comes in, right? So Sage is that one single platform which will help you drive, the need, or help you drive this testing that is required, for you to test these AI-based bots comprehensively, right? So what is Sage at heart? So Sage is an AI model which is designed to stress the bots that you're building to the maximum load, not from a typical load perspective, as we know, not from a performance standpoint, but from variety of inputs, right? So, and then generate synonymous entities to check whether the bot detects all of, if not most of them. So it should detect all of them correctly, right? And again, the key USP of Sage is it defines the tests, connects directly with the bot building platforms. And this is an extremely important thing. And that's why we call it one of our key USPs, is that we connect directly to the bot building platform, and we'll see how that works. And then reduce the overall cycle time, right? So in other words, all the tests which fail, whenever you run a test, right, through Sage, they're refed back to your bot, and then use that as a training data. So this will ensure that there is a high accuracy of the bot right when it is released out of the box, right? So that is fundamentally, what Sage is, right? So now, to be specific, going back to our same example, so we can help the teams in the following areas, right? So one is, if you look at it, so at the beginning, if you took the same example, we can generate thousands of utterances, right? Which will, and then check whether your bot that you're building is detecting all those intents correctly. We can generate, again, equal amount of entities, right, to sort of detect whether the entity is detected correctly or not, right, by this bot that you're trying to build. And so this way, and then in addition to that, you can also use our Qyrus is a platform which we'll briefly touch upon at the end of the discussion. You can also use our API testing service to check the fulfillment side of things as well, whether the requests are formed correctly and then the response is received or not, right? So that's the key thing. So we are going to focus on these two things, and then we are going to use Dialogflow today. And so let me quickly switch over to the demo now. So as part of this demo, we will be, let me share my screen. Okay, all right. So we will be primarily looking at two things. One, so in terms of setup, right? So there are 4 aspects that we will do. Number one is we will be creating a bot on Dialogflow, and then we'll be connecting this particular bot. And since I said it directly integrates, Sage directly integrates with the bot building platform, we will be connecting your Dialogflow project where you're actually building the bot to Sage, and then configuring our tests, running those tests on Sage, and then seeing how the results are produced and how the actual training is happening on the Dialogflow side, right? So that's way. So you have built a bot. So assume that you have built a bot. You have to connect this bot to Sage so that they can talk to each other. That's when the testing happens, right? And then we'll look at some of the reports, and then we'll go back and see inside Dialogflow as to how this whole thing is being set up, right? So with that, let's start with the demo. So now what I've done is, so as I said, we'll not go deep into some of these aspects of how we build the bot and so on, but we will be primarily focusing on, trying to connect this bot, right? So now here is an example. So here is loan application. So if you see, the loan application has a few intents defined. So this is the intent. As you can see, we are under the intents tab here. So we say application for a third. I mean, these are like 4 or 5 examples that we have as part of this setup. So developer has defined 4 intents, and the rest of the heavy lifting is done by Google itself in this case, because we're using Dialogflow. And then you can see there are some parts which are mentioned in color. So those are the entities, right? So when you go back to entities, so there's few entities here. Like for example, amount is one entity, and then loan type is another entity, right? So if I go back, so you can see this is what the loan application aspect takes, right? So this is a car loan, and this is the amount. So we have essentially mapped that here. Amount is amount, right? And then similarly, this particular thing is car, so which is the loan type, right? So the entities and intents, as I said, needs to be determined by the developer, right? So this has got nothing to do with testing. So this is defined by the developer, and then we are now trying to test this part. So now what do I do, right? So now that since there's a setup, so I go back to Sage, and then I'm going to log in with my credentials, and then I'm going to go to this intent testing, right? So now I'm going to go and create a test case. So let's call it, let's say loan application. Okay, for car. Okay, let's say car loan application, right? So that's my um, app. So to test car loan app bot, something like that. And as I said, we have native integrations with these 3 platforms. So I'll select Dialogflow and I'll go and create a test. So obviously there are a few things. I mean, this is more like, this is something that you will get from Google Dialogflow. So I don't have to like sort of worry about it. So this is your account's secret key and stuff like that. So project ID is something that I can take from here. So I'll say, okay. So I'll come back. So this is my project ID. So I'll just take this from, I mean, this is the process of connecting Sage to Dialogflow so that we can start testing, right? And we would feed in some sample intents. This is, think of it like a seed content, where basically the same intents that we defined are basically loaded here. Like we know this is a thing. And then now this is the part where I mentioned about the idiosyncrasies of humans, right? So there are 3 kinds of tests, right? So what do you mean by 3 kinds of tests? Is this is what we typically call as transformations. So what essentially happens here is, as you can see, so when I click on this, so it says like what are the things that we're trying to do here, right? One is we are inducing spelling mistakes, right? We're inducing grammatical mistakes. So we are essentially now generating utterances, right? Because we are doing intent detection. So we are going to generate some a few sentences or few utterances, and then we'll see how well the bot detects those intents, right? So as part of this, these are things that people do, right? So there are grammatical mistakes, and then there are contractions, text contractions as we call them, right? So that's one. The second thing is what we call as human errors, right? So these errors are typically the errors that come out like when you type something or you're trying to type something very fast. So words get swapped, and instead of saying I have something, I would say I apostrophe VE. So those are what we call as text contractions. And then there are spelling mistakes, obviously. And the third mode, which is our advanced mode, is where it really loads the bot or stresses the bot big time, is what we call as things. It's a combination of multiple things with addition of things like using untrivial words, right? And then messing with the structure of the sentence itself, and substitutions and repetitions and so on and so forth, right? And you'll see that. So now I'm going to choose the test type as induce human errors, where we spoke, and then we say how many sentences would you like to generate, right? Paraphrases, as we call it. Because why is it a paraphrase? Because we already have defined certain examples. The developer has defined certain samples or sample intents. So what we're still trying to do is paraphrase it with. And again, since we are pressed by time, so I'm just doing it with 10. But basically, you can generate thousands of such, right? And then once I define all this, I could go ahead and say connect. So what happens when I connect? So it says grant access, obviously. And then I'm going to log in with my Google ID using this. So I'll get a code, which is, again, it's a standard process. So nothing from a testing perspective. And now, since this has happened, so I'll just go ahead and run the test. So once I start running the test, let's quickly switch to Dialogflow to see what's happening, right? So when I go to history, you can see that there are aspects which have already started. You see here are the things which have started picking up, right? So this is now 15. So there are multiple things which are sort of unconnected. So there are some things which are which are malformed and so on and so forth, right? So we can keep doing this, and once it hits all this 25 plus, so it's sort of done. So what I can go back to do, it's still running here. Just let's give it a second. And okay, so let's do this. Right. Okay. So this is still running. So just give us a second. So let's go back. And here is, yeah. So if you see, so this one has the loan application along with a few other intents, the file that I choose, but loan application is the main one, right? So here you can see that the results that came back, right, for normal, so there was an 82% accuracy, right? So 82% of the time, we have the intent was detected correctly. So when we did word swap, so it was 66% accuracy. And then whenever there was spelling mistake induced, so that had sort of 75% accuracy as part of this. Now we can actually go and understand. So if you want to understand more about this, like, what intents were detected correctly, right? So here you can see, I need to apply for a payday loan. It says I need to apply for a mortgage loan. So it sort of transformed into, like we said, car loan. It tried multiple other ways of asking or getting to that point, right? So if you have to focus on that one particular intent. Now here you can see that it simply said I need to apply for a loan, so sort of it understood. But then it said, like, for example, there was a spelling mistake here which said I need to, and you can see the spelling of the need is different, so it could not, right? So this is a spelling mistake transformation, as we call it, right? And here, where there was a spelling mistake, but it was still able to identify, right? So essentially what we are saying is, here I need to apply for a credit card, right? And for a new credit card. So again, we spoke about loans, but here it is not, right? So there is no concept of loan here because it's a card. So in that case, the word loan was swapped with card, right? And then it could not identify it, right? So what this essentially means is that now I take this as an example. So right now, if it is normal, so it's 82%. So we have to get it up, right? And then if it is word swap, it is 66, as I said. And then if it is, it's 75 in case of spelling mistakes, right? So what I can do here is, one, I could download this data and then go and retrain my model, right? That's one. The second thing I could do is take the ones where there was no intent or the intent was not detected. So I can go back and add it to my training set, right? So essentially now, again, when I rerun this test, it's going to go back and then run this particular test again, right? With all these intents which were not identified. So now you get the point. So essentially what we are trying to say here is, the more time, so now your intent is to get this accuracy high, probably more than probably 95% probably, right? So you can keep running these tests again and again. So, and to a point where we see higher accuracy, right? So that we can be rest assured when the bot comes out, and you can sort of directly send it to UAT or to your beta test or something like that, where people can actually interact with the bot and then go figure out and get the real world feedback. Now, essentially, this saves a lot of time, especially around the generation of these intents. And more importantly, it doesn't follow the typical life cycle, right? Where we have to run this or generate test data somewhere else, and then connect to this bot, execute the test, and then analyze all the results, and then go raise a bug, let the developer fix it, retrain it, and send it back. So all of that middle part is completely cut off, right? So what we're essentially doing is, wherever the entity could not, or the intent was not detected correctly, you can basically add it to the training set and rerun this particular test. So you can keep doing this until a point where you will see higher accuracy across the board, not just for the not just for the for one kind of transform, right? So there are other things, right? So we could run it in advanced mode and so on. So you keep running this until a point where it sort of creates a highly accurate bot out of the box, right? So we just spoke about intent detection, right? So without again going through the whole process of running it, so what we can also look at is how entity detection works. So I'll go back. So because now this is let's take this example of card application test, right? So this is applying for a card. So I can go look at this test. you can see that, sorry, probably not this. So let's go back. So let's take a very simple example where it's easier to, to sort of understand this. So uh, let's take this probably. And yeah, so here you can see, so what is the entities that are getting detected, right? So the entity type is merchant, and then so this is the main thing, right? So the entity has to be extracted from this. So this is like an order, think of it like an ordering bot, right? So where it has to detect these entities, which are the which are in this case Etsy is an entity, right? So which is a merchant. So I'm trying to understand the merchant entity, and we've created multiple such entities, and it's able to, like, say eBay and Walmart, because these are all merchant entities. So the Sage is smart enough to create multiple such entities for a value called, or an entity type called merchant. So, and then whether your bot is able to figure that out, right? So whether it is able to extract that Walmart is the entity and it's a merchant, right? So that's how we are testing. So if we sort of go back to, let's say, another example of, let's say, a banking bot, right? So which is one of the examples here. So you can see here, there's an account type, right? So this entity type is account, right? So there's a different kinds of account, and then whether it is able to detect that. So salvage is an account type, and then here, and then there's an investment account, there's a savings account. So, but if you can see, it's the entity type is an account. So Sage's ability to create synonymous entities so that you can test your entity detection very well, right? So that also happens out of the box, right? So and again, you can keep running this until a point where you will get maximum output from this, right? And again, there are good examples. I mean, it's pretty deep in terms of what kind of scores are we looking at. So whether it is partial score or full score, and again, the same metrics are given, like what is entity detection accuracy. So in this case, it is 25% versus 75%, right? So essentially, what we did, right, going back to our presentation, what essentially we did is we looked at this aspect where we generated, again, in this demo. So we just sort of generated around 15 to 20 entities, utterances, and we detected that 75% of the entities in normal transformation, or if everything is fine, it's in an ideal state, it went in. And when there were spelling mistakes in a couple of places, it could not. So we could add it to the training set and retrain it, right? So the intent detection was at that level. And we also saw an example of how entity detection happens, using Sage, right? So, so going back, so we did this, and now what are some of the things that we would like to highlight here is that this is the fastest way you can test your AI bots, right? Purely from, and again, I repeat, AI bots are not rule-based bots, because you're essentially not writing test cases in conventional sense. You're skipping all that part. You're directly, if there are bugs, that there are bugs, you quickly add them back to your training and rerun it until a point you get greater than 90, 95, whatever your objective accuracy might be. It has direct integration. You are not sort of trying to orchestrate many different things here. It directly integrates with Dialogflow, with.ai and Lex. For now, we're also working on some custom bot integrations as well. And this is what we call as loop closure. Loop closure is basically, there's no manual process. If you find an issue, you directly add it to the data set, you retrain it, come back, and keep stressing it with different transforms that we have, and then get to a point without actually having to involve anyone else, and going through a longer process of finding and fixing issues and so on. And then it closes. And then again, if you see in the market today, so there's no third-party solution, right, which will help you test entities, right? So entity is very hard to test, because and it really involves a lot of intelligent understanding on the tool itself, right? So before we generate multiple entities, we should know that a merchant can be Walmart, a merchant can be Etsy, a merchant can be Amazon or someone else, right? So the solution which you're using to test your bot itself has to know what are these different entities. Understanding of this landscape is something that becomes extremely important. That's what our bots come out. And overall, I think net what we have seen with other solutions, the way people test their bot, and we have found it 70% less expensive than in a conventional sense, right? So again, so sort of before I hand it back to Ravi, you can always reach us at Qyrus.com, and you can write to us on any of these handles, and then we'll be happy to give you an early access to it, right? So with that, I'll hand it back to Ravi.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you also for staying on time. That was extremely well timed. So at this point, we just want to run through a couple of questions that's come through the Q&A sections. We've already answered a couple via chat. But I think I have 6 main questions. One is about the competition, which we will skip for the moment. The other one was about dialogue flow, which I think we've already answered. But here's a question for you, Amit. The question is, compared to manual testing, how is testing via Sage better? I mean, I think you kind of discussed the unique value propositions, but perhaps you could summarize that again for the audience.
Yeah, I think I can hear my own. Okay. Yeah. So I think from a pure manual testing perspective, we are exactly, I would say, I mean, again, I will use the word idiosyncrasies of humans. So essentially, that's what unique aspect that humans bring to the table, right? So asking questions in a creative way. But it's fine when it comes out naturally. But when you look at it from when you have to do it at scale, right? So you have to run thousands of it. But that's when we hit a bottleneck as far as manual testing is concerned. And that's where Sage and its transformations come into picture. Like we spoke about human errors and advanced mode and normal transformation and so on. I think that's where we really differentiate, and we can run this at scale as good as how humans would actually ask the utterances. So that's number one. Number two is, if not anything, you can always use Sage to create these utterances and then go and ask it. But I think purely from a manual testing perspective, I think of it like manual testing at scale with human level interaction capabilities or utterance generation capabilities, but in a very automated fashion.
Thanks, Amit. I'm going to skip to another question that just came through chat. I think it's related to the first question, but essentially the question is, how do we test the validity of the answers provided by the AI? So that's sort of the background. Is it possible to check the accuracy percentage-wise using Sage?
Right. So I think I'll answer the second one first. I think accuracy, and again, accuracy is the only metric that we give out, right? So we spoke, we saw that accuracy was 75-25 normal, 75% accurate, 25% was not. So we sort of gave these metrics out like that, right? So the answer is yes, we can check the accuracy. And coming to the validity of the response itself, right? So validity of the response is something that happen it only happens after we detect the intents and entities correct. So validity is only after the bot has understood the question correctly is when we can validate the answer. So what we are primarily focusing on right now is the first aspect of it, which is where everything stands on, right? So if your intent detection is not right or entity detection is not right, you might end up answering something which will not be valid, but that's secondary. But primarily we are focusing as part of this these features to only on the intent and entity detection. But however, with our fulfillment testing feature, you can also check the validity of the response, which we typically call as functional testing. But yes, that is possible. But right now we are discussing primarily on intent and entity.
Yeah, but I think the point is it's possible. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
The next question, I have 2 more questions at this point. Can I use Sage to test non-AI based bots?
Yes and no. I would say yes, because you can download the utterances that we can generate for you and then try it on your rule-based bot. No, because that sort of takes away the key advantage of Sage, which is ability to integrate with the bot building platforms, so that you don't have to do reactive testing. So testing should be part of the overall building process itself.
Thanks, Amit. And I have one more question, and then we might take a look at the polls. The question is, can you give us a sense for new features? I suppose it's a question about the roadmap.
Right. Yeah, I think a few things that we are adding to this. Number one is voice integration. So we would like to start, like right now it supports text-based interaction, but however, I think voice to text is a solved use case. It's considered as a solved use case by many. So it's essentially that's a very natural extension for us. So we are going to add voice integration to this. And second is we are also working on context testing. So we spoke about context store where it keeps the previous chat information. So it's important to understand how well that context is stored and retrieved. So that becomes our obvious second interaction, and also bring our fulfillment testing aspect, which is Qyrus's API testing capabilities, to this, so that you could sort of test the entire flow of the of your bot. So basically, those are three near-term things that we're working on, which would address many of the common questions that we get.
Thanks, Amit. In fact, there's one more question that's come up. I'm not sure if I completely understand it, but let's see if I can summarize it. Just in terms of, say, version control, is any kind of versioning capability within Sage?
Yeah, I think every test gets a unique ID, so that what was the how well did your bot improve over multiple rounds of execution, so to speak, right? So you should see, and we record every run separately with its unique UUID, as we call it, so, or version ID, and then we can actually see this running. So essentially what it means is, like, you ran first time, it had 75% accuracy. You ran it second time, it went up to 90, and then you ran it third time, it went up to whatever, 95. But again, if you run the first test again, you should now see a higher accuracy and not back to 75, right? So you have that version control capability in terms of your rounds of testing, so that you can backtrace and see how your bot improved over a period of time.
Perfect. Thanks, Amit. I'm just going to quickly summarize the polls just so that we can close on that note. This is information that we've collected from the audience while the webinar was in session. So the first question that we asked is, how do you currently test chatbots? 75% of the audience said manual mode, and 25% said automated. And then the second question was, how confident are you that your chatbot testing approach is catching potential issues or all issues? 4% said highly confident, 26% said not confident, and 70% said somewhere in between. So that gives us an indication of the confidence levels. And then the next question was, what tools and techniques do you use to test your chatbots? Again, it's just a similar question. It was about testing. I think manual testing again comes out on top, 58%, and then 35% said we do it through API testing. And the next question was, have you used AI or machine learning to help automation? And the answer was 16% said yes, and 84% said no, we've never used it. And then there's a self-serving question about whether you're interested in knowing more about Sage, and the audience is more or less split on that. So I'm going to take that as a relatively positive feedback for us. So anyway, that's as much as we have for today. Sarah, can I turn this back to you?
Yes. All right. Well, the contact info for you guys is on the screen. Anything else on that? I see we got, I think, all the social media covered there. So that will conclude our event for today. Thank you, Amit and Ravi, for your time today, and Qyrus for your sponsorship of the web seminar. And of course, a special thank you out to our audience for spending your time with us. We hope you have a great day, and we hope to see you at a future event.
Thank you.
Bye.